I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHack's Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is pet or partner. So today we're going to be talking about two of the many different structures romantic relationships can assume. Just like there is more than one way to structure a company, there is more than one way to structure a romantic relationship. Think about it. Some organizations present themselves as very egalitarian. They're flat, they're collaborative, they're culture-focused, and people-forward. And there are other companies that are very hierarchical. They're demanding, they're competitive, they're outcome-focused, and merit-based. Folks in these latter companies are incentivized to optimize their performance, and they understand that their results take precedence over their relationships. If that doesn't work for some people, they have absolutely no obligation to seek employment there, and they can content themselves with one of the less stressful, but generally lower paying alternatives. There is no need to structure all companies the same. Similarly, there is no need to structure all relationships the same way. There are pros and cons to all the various relationship structures, and it falls to each individual to decide for him or herself what works best. This is essential because you can't have it both ways. Just like you can't have, say, the supportive culture of the flat organization and the competitive salary of the hierarchical organization, there are definite trade-offs when it comes to how romantic relationships are structured. Today, I'm going to be talking about two of the most common romantic relationship structures and their respective pros and cons, so that you can make an informed decision as to which structure works best. While there are many ways to structure romantic relationships, two of the most prevalent are pet and partner. Pet is going to rub people the wrong way. They prefer partner because they believe the term to be more respectful. However, I would argue that it is only more respectful when it is applied accurately. And partner is actually much more prone to misapplication than the other term. In any case, let's start with pet. First and foremost, to allay your outrage, the thing you have to understand about this relationship structure is that, for better or worse, people tend to treat their pets better than they treat their partners. I'll say that again. People tend to treat their pets better than they treat their partners. Because what is a pet? A pet is typically just a source of love and joy. People make up songs about their pets. They have 18 different pet names for their pets. They have more pictures of their pets on their phones than they do of their partners. And more than anything else, they typically just want to make sure that their pets are safe and happy. People put in a lot of effort into their relationships with their pets because they just love them so very much. They're just so sweet and cute, right? But this relationship is predicated on a very clear power differential. In fact, I would argue that it requires a very clear power differential in order to operate. Pet and keeper are not on the same level, and there are privileges and responsibilities associated with each of those roles. Like, the keeper has to feed the pet, not the other way around. The keeper has to shelter the pet, not the other way around. But in return for assuming these responsibilities, the keeper enjoys privileges that the pet does not, such as the privilege of deciding where and when to go on walks, for instance. And that's kind of fair, right? Unequal responsibilities, but unequal privileges. If you appreciate the insights on this channel, I would highly encourage you to get your hands on a copy of my book, The Value of Others. Over the course of 432 pages, I delve deep into my economic model of relationships and explain the behavior of both men and women in the game of mating and dating. I also provide a lot of actionable advice on how to get and keep more of what you want in the sexual marketplace. Once you read The Value of Others, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Now available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback formats. The links are in the description. On the other hand, partner implies a much smaller power differential. In fact, I would argue that it requires a much smaller power differential in order to operate. Two partners kind of have to be on the same level. Otherwise, they're not really partners. If one partner, accurately or not, believes that he or she is more competent than the other, or is putting in more effort than the other, then that's going to destroy that partnership. And in fact, if you look at most of the fights that couples have, they tend to be along these lines. Partnerships are formed to mitigate deficiencies in skill and ability in order to accomplish a mutually defined goal. This is why the successful ones are always based on complementarity. I'm going to be the CEO and you're going to be the CFO. We do not need two CEOs. Two CEOs is just asking for trouble. And the entire point of putting up with the trouble of relating to you is based on my recognition that I need you or someone with your skill set to reach my goal and get what I want. And that's why the fundamental rule of partnership is everyone do your fucking job. Like, no one is going to come up with cute little songs about their CFO. They would probably feel demeaning anyway. And in any case, ain't nobody got time for that. I've got my hands full, and I expect you to be carrying your weight as well. And if I end up being more useful and productive than you, then we're going to have a problem. This is what people really don't understand about partnerships. They think that just because they're partners, that is because they decided to structure the relationship that way, that they are equals. Like they think they are equals by virtue of the fact they are partners. But when it comes to people, there are vast differences when it comes to competence and effort. And a partnership can only be sustained between equals. That means that it's actually the other way around. They are partners by virtue of the fact that they are equals. A partnership formed between people of unequal competence and effort cannot succeed. I'll say that again. A partnership formed between people of unequal competence or effort cannot succeed. It's impossible. On the other hand, that inequality is decidedly not a problem when it comes to pets. No one expects the pet to put in as much effort as the keeper. No one expects the pet to be as competent as the keeper. And that, of course, doesn't mean that the keeper just abuses and disrespects the pet. No, a pet is a source of love and joy for most keepers. Do you understand? The issue is that people want both. They want the privileges of being or having a pet and the privileges of being or having a partner. And it don't work that way. So people need to be real honest with themselves about who they are and what they want. Trust me, there are plenty of people out there who would be happy being a pet in the sense of having their needs taken care of for them and having a relationship that is primarily founded upon emotional connection. However, these people also have to accept the inequality inherent in that arrangement, which is actually what makes the relationship stress-free for the pet. But if the pet also wants to be like an equal decision maker in the relationship, then that's a pet wanting to be a partner, which would mean that that person would have to get to work and hold up his or her end of the bargain. On the other hand, if people want an egalitarian structure with shared power and control, and they want the romance and the feelings and the pampered consideration, then they are also not thinking clearly. You signed up to be a co-founder, which means that you are here to work. You have a job to do, and I will remind you of that as long as you're in that role, and you can't slack off ever. Just how it is. Like you get maybe once a year, you go out and blow off some steam, but the rest of the time you are hard at work. That's how partnerships work. It also means, if we're talking about partnerships, that if I'm becoming more competent or active, if I'm growing, then you kind of have to grow too. Because if the competence or effort gap gets too big, then we're no longer going to be equals. And the partnership, rather than reflect a natural equality, is going to impose a forced equality, which is unsustainable. Remember, there are pros and cons to being a pet, and there are pros and cons to being a partner. So it's important for people to be honest with themselves with respect to their intentions, because they are not going to be able to get everything. And that's okay. It turns out that you just might not need everything in order to be happy. In general, the larger the gap in age, status, wealth, and ability, the more likely you're going to have a keeper-pet relationship. And this can be very satisfying for both parties because, as I've said, people tend to treat their pets better than they treat their partners. People expect things from their partners. They don't typically expect things from their pets. A pet could shit on the floor in front of the house guests, and it's still going to be your little schmoopy. Do you understand? On the other hand, where there is comparable age, status, wealth, and ability, and for as long as there is comparable age, status, wealth, and ability, there is likely a partner relationship. And this structure is not for idlers. You can get a lot done, but it's a structure based on complementary skill sets in order to achieve a superordinate goal. Hope I clear a few things up with that. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And please, send this episode to someone who you think might benefit from its message. I know you know somebody who needs or wants to hear this. Send it along, because it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow. Other value props. Anyone looking to join my free weekly newsletter, for which I write original content, or book a paid one-on-one consultation with yours truly, can do so on my website. There's also my best-selling book, The Value of Others, in which I explore the economic model of intersexual relationships, and my private member community, the Captain's Quarters, where, among other things, I host group consultation calls and Q&As with invited guests from all over the internet. It's a great group. We have a lot of fun. Check it out. Links to everything are in the description below. As always, I appreciate your support, and thank you for listening.